All right. Good morning, evening. I'm recording in the evening, but you're probably watching this in the morning because you're all really good students and get up early and check your history homework. But good morning slash evening from Quarantine Central. If we look at our checklist for the week, I hope you guys can all find the checklist. Everything's about the end of the chapter and getting the review sheet ready. Okay. So here's the deal with the review sheet. And I mentioned this yesterday, but I really, really mean this, guys. You're going to hand in a picture of the review sheet. You got to go don't spend your life on this, but you need to go overboard on these questions. Okay, you need to make sure that you have everything that you could possibly, any way I could come at you on the test, because these are going to be essay questions. So if I say, what was the New Jersey plan, and on your review sheet you put like the plan for the little states, that gets you like nothing on the test. Okay, if I ask you what was the Virginia plan, and you're like the plan for the big states, that gets you nothing. So instead, you have to say the Virginia plan had two different legislatures, one based, and they were going to be chosen, and then they had three branches of government, and get it all in there. Okay, do this on a separate sheet of paper. Get it all in there, because when you come into the test, it's going to be essay, and the essay question is going to be like, explain the Virginia plan. Go. And if you say it was the plan for the big states, you get a 0. Okay, so go out of your way to make sure you have big deal, lots of stuff on this. Explain everything that you can. Now there are a couple quick answers on here, like which state was the first to ratify the Constitution, which was the last. That's a 2-word answer. You don't have to go much deeper than that. And you guys can get rid of that last one that we don't have our books. You don't have to do the one from page 222. Okay, that's going to be kind of a consistent thing throughout the year until if we ever get books. Okay, so know your stuff. Do your review sheet extremely well. Do not cut any corners. If what were the causes of Shays' Rebellion? That's not a 2 or 3 word answer. Okay, what was the 3/5 compromise? That's not a 2 or 3 word answer. Okay, as when we say compromise, make sure you include how it made each side happy and how it settled the problem. Okay, so do a great job on your review sheet. Okay, if you don't, you get a bad grade on your review sheet, and you're going to just do terrible on your test. And I don't want that to happen so early in the marking period. Okay. Secondly, grades are pouring in. I'm catching up 7th graders today. I'll be catching up you guys tomorrow. Well, I'm sorry. Tomorrow is now Tuesday, so as you're watching this, I'll be catching you guys up on grades. Okay. It's probably a 2-day process, but we're finally having a chance to kick butt on those, and that's because my wife and I've kind of worked out a schedule where I get 6 to 10 in the morning, she gets 10 to 6, and then I get 6 to 10 at night. So to work on stuff. So I'm pulling some time to get this stuff done. So look forward to a lot of grades pouring in over. I already made spots for them in the grade book. So if you want to know what's going to come in, I put them in the grade book. I haven't put any grades in there, but I made the categories. I made the actual grades. So you can see what's going to come in, and you can check to see, make sure you got them all done and all that kind of stuff. All right, let's talk about the notes to finish the chapter. That's world history. Here we go. Federalists versus Anti-Federalists. Where we left off was the delegates to the original Constitutional Convention have to go home and now sell the Constitution to the states. The states have to agree to give up power to get the theoretical stuff that the Constitution offers them. And the people who want to pass the Constitution and create a strong federal government, which is what we now call our government, in Washington, D.C., were called Federalists. The people who were anti those guys and that's misspelled. They were anti-federalists or anti-federalists. And these were some powerful people. The anti-federalists, there's some names in there. There's some people that are like a big deal. But their big deal, their big arguments, we talked about this yesterday, was that the states were going to lose power and they're supposed to be doing all the work. There was no Bill of Rights to protect the people. Every state had a Bill of Rights that protected their people from their government. This was going to create a new government with no protection. Okay, well, as you guys are probably aware, we did add a Bill of Rights shortly thereafter. We'll talk about that today. And the president was too powerful, especially because they didn't have to worry about losing their job. They could get elected over and over and over and over again. We've only had one president ever elected more than twice. But according to the original Constitution, the president could run as many times as they want. And if you win your first 7 elections, you're not going to lose your 8th one. That's just not how life works. So the president can become too much like a king. So now it's time to sell them. Each state is going to hold their own convention. And each state is going to take a long time to make this decision because it's the whole history of America depends on this, or the future of America. Now history, then future of America. depends on this. And the Federalists and Anti-Federalists in each state quickly lined up. There was not a lot of middle ground. Either people were all for it and said it's worth the loss of power, or the people were against it and said creates a far too powerful government. We can't handle this. The first state to actually ratify the Constitution was, I don't know if you can see it under the picture here, Delaware, this little tiny country that's mostly surrounded by New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Maryland. And their actual state motto is now "First in Freedom," which means they were the first ones to sign off on the Constitution. And the truth is, smaller states had a lot to gain in the Constitution, because smaller states, above all, really couldn't protect themselves. If they were going to if they were going to get attacked, they were going to be the ones that got picked off first. If England came a knocking, Delaware is dead meat. Rhode Island is dead meat. Connecticut is dead meat. They can't put together even a decent-sized army to even control their own people. So these small states had a lot to gain from the Constitution, including the House of Representatives, and banded together. There's taxes from a lot of other states that can be used to help Delaware. There's soldiers that could be created. They could create an army and a navy to protect Delaware. So especially small states on the coast, and they're all on the coast right now, have a lot to gain from the Constitution. So they're going to jump on relatively quickly. In December 7th, 1787, which is very, very quickly after the original Constitutional Convention. Very quickly after that, we see Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Georgia, and Connecticut. All of these, except for Pennsylvania, at this time are considered small states. And remember, when we say small, we're based that on population, not on the size of land. So all these states are small. Remember, Georgia's the smallest state in population completely, except when you add in the slaves. It has the fewest free voters in it. By the way, we need to get to 9. Remember, we got to get to 9 states to have the Constitution kick in. We want all 13. But when we get to 9, we can start passing laws under the Constitution. Okay? So now we're at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, including Delaware. The big question becomes Virginia. Virginia is not only right in the middle of the country, it's got the largest population. That's going to change in a couple years. It's got the largest population, and it's got a lot of money, and a lot of our founding fathers came out of Virginia. Guys like Thomas Jefferson and George Washington all come out of Virginia. So it's kind of one of those, without Virginia, it's not going to happen. Like if we are 12 out of 13 states sign on, and Virginia doesn't, then we have no chance. The Anti-Federalists felt that Massachusetts was their best chance, because after all, Massachusetts believes in, well, practically no government. These were the guys that fought against the king the hardest. They believe that Massachusetts, above all, believes that nobody tells me what to do. I do what I want, right? So they felt that Massachusetts was their biggest chance to kill this whole Constitution. But while they were concentrating on winning in Massachusetts, the Massachusetts actually signed on, to everybody's surprise. The Federalists, which there were a lot of Federalists and big names like the Adams brothers or Adams cousins, believed in the ratification, believed in the power of the federal government, and believed that we wouldn't have been able to win another Revolutionary War. We wouldn't be able to fight in England or France again without some type of federal government. So they lose, and that makes number 6. And then now Virginia. So we got 2 biggies. We got Virginia and we got New York. Okay, there's other important states, but without Virginia, you're not a country. They're just too powerful. Without New York and all the money and population in New York, and that's the center of all the banking, and it's got the biggest port. Without New York, this doesn't work. Without Virginia, this doesn't work. So as Virginia's debating it, Maryland and South Carolina sign on, and all of a sudden, we're 1 state shy of the Constitution coming into effect. And here's the really interesting thing. If 9 states sign on to it, the Constitution starts working. And if you're not one of the states that signed on to it, you don't have a seat at the table. You're not in the room. Okay, you don't have any representatives. You don't have any senators because you didn't sign the Constitution. So when you get to 9, you're going to see everybody line up. So 8 is really the line. At 8, there is no country. At 9, you'll get to 13, or you'll get there, or 12 pretty quickly, because nobody wants to be left out of that room. Nobody wants to be in the room when they're not in the room when they're deciding taxes. Nobody wants to not be in the room when they're creating roads, and nobody wants to not be in the room when they're deciding how much each state has to give in the terms of the army. Okay, so Virginia's kind of holding out. They got two big guys. Patrick Henry, so much power in the state legislature. Patrick Henry's been a statesman, and he's been behind the scenes the whole time, just doing amazing things. Patrick Henry was a huge force in creating the Virginia Constitution, which has the list of the Bill of Rights that pretty much become the Bill of Rights. This guy's a genius. And then James Madison, who's eventually going to become president and is also a very intelligent, very good speaker, are fighting against each other. And this is like a battle of titans. And eventually, while they're debating it, New Hampshire signs on. And that means we now have a constitution. We now have a new country. There's 4 states that are left out. And again, without Virginia, this isn't going to work. But at the same time, Virginia doesn't want to be left out of the room. Okay? They want to be one of the deciders when it comes to things like slavery, when it comes to things like taxes and armies and ports and how we're going to deal with exporting tobacco. They want to be in the room. Okay? So the Constitution is going to go into effect. We're going to look for those other 4 countries. As soon as Virginia ratifies it, New York and North Carolina, New York's the big other one, but North Carolina is also a huge state. But New York's the other big one, okay? And kind of like New York and Virginia are like rivals. They sign on very quickly. We're only left with one missing, and that's good old Rhode Island. And the reason why Rhode Island is last is because they weren't in the Constitutional Convention. They are clueless. Every other state had representatives that were there and can say, here's what this means, and here's why we did this. And man, we talked a long time on this, and here's why we decided. Rhode Island's just sitting there going, I mean, it says this, but I don't know what it means. They're clueless. So they eventually sign on, and we do get all 13 states. Okay, so the ratification was celebrated on July 4th, 1788, and they chose that day because it's the day of the Declaration of Independence. So it's, 22 years later? No, 12 years later. So they celebrate it then. But the Anti-Federalists who have lost the fight, the Anti-Federalists were fighting not to get the Constitution passed. They lose. The Constitution gets passed. They now turn to fixing the problems. Well, they're not going to be able to fix the presidency. That's going to take a long time as far as the extra being able to run as many times as you want. Okay, but they immediately turn to a Bill of Rights, and they say this is dangerous. We cannot give this much power to government and not protect the rights and freedoms of the people. So as soon as the 9th state ratified the Constitution, the new government starts working. They elect George Washington president. No-brainer. He's the only person that's ever been elected unanimously, because the first time a president took office, there was no election. They just picked some electors, and they chose George Washington. Then after that, there's going to be an election. But the first time, there was no general election where we vote, okay, because we need to get going. Let's go. Okay. John Adams was elected vice president. And this is kind of funny because John Adams is one of the least likely guys to ever run a country. He's going to be our second president. He's not that great at it. We'll talk about him in the future. And then the states, the Anti-Federalists kick in and start saying, we got to get a Bill of Rights. Okay, so we have a guy to run the country. They start sending people to Congress. And the first thing the Congress does is starts working on a Bill of Rights. Now, according to the Constitution, amendments have to be passed by Congress and then also by the states. So the framers were very smart and said things are going to come up we don't expect. We need to be able to adjust the Constitution. They also knew they might have made mistakes. Maybe some of the stuff in the Constitution is stupid and sucks. And by the way, there was a bunch of stuff in there that's like, what? We'll talk about a couple of those in a couple chapters here. They said we need to be able to get rid of stuff in here. Maybe we made a terrible mistake. And rather than start all over like we did with the Articles, okay? Maybe if we have an unworkable document, we should have a way to fix the document. Well, you do that with an amendment, okay? You add new stuff with an amendment. You decide you can adjust to changing times with an amendment, okay? If aliens came down from space, we'd have to have some type of an amendment giving our government the right to deal with aliens because there's nothing in the Constitution about it. I mean, that's kind of an extreme case, but you can deal with new things with amendments. So the amendments process was put right into the Constitution. It's the reason we're such a stable country. We don't have to shred up the Constitution. We can just change it. The Articles we had to shred up. They made it too hard to do anything. Well, the Constitution makes it difficult, but not extremely difficult to make an amendment. So the first 10 amendments were passed together. They were the Bill of Rights, and they largely were stolen gleefully from Virginia. We added some other things too, but Virginia's Bill of Rights was great. I mean, we didn't have to improve upon it too much. So that is the end of the chapter, we now have a new government, the people's rights are protected, and it's a functioning, changeable document that we still live under.